All right, good afternoon and welcome to the Mellon Speaker Series featuring our very own Carnegie Mellon University alumnus, Dave Ciesinski. Please take your seats and settle in for the talk. It is wonderful to see so many students here this afternoon. My name is Emma Shahzad and I am an undergraduate student at the Tepper School of Business, and I also had the pleasure of interning at Marzetti this summer. Based on my personal experience and Dave's impressive background, I know you will enjoy learning from our guest as he shares leadership lessons and industry insights. Thank you to today's club co-sponsors who helped plan this special event: Carnegie Mellon Business Association, the American Marketing Association, Tepper Veterans Association, and the Tepper Marketing Club. Please take a moment now to prepare for the discussion. We kindly ask that you turn off your cell phones, stash your laptops, and put away any food. You will receive your ticket for lunch on the way out of the room this afternoon. It is now my pleasure to introduce Isabelle Bajou, the Richard P. Simmons Professor of Finance and the 10th Dean of the Tepper School of Business, to formally welcome you and introduce our special guest.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Emma, for the very kind introduction. And let me echo your welcome to everyone in attendance today, in person and remotely, as I begin the introduction. David A. Ciesinski is President, Chief Executive Officer and Director of Lancaster Colony Corporation, and President of T. Marzetti Company, a wholly owned subsidiary. Lancaster Colony is a $2 billion manufacturer, a marketer of specialty food products for the retail and food service markets. It operates 13 production facilities in 7 different states and employs 3,400 people. Since joining the company in 2016, Dave has rebuilt the leadership team and led the development and implementation of the company's Better Food Company growth plan, which has nearly doubled the size of the business and consistently delivered top quartile financial results and world-class workplace safety. Dave previously served as Executive Vice President and President of Kraft Meal Solution Division. He's also a 13-year veteran of H.J. Heinz Company, holding executive roles including Vice President of Global Business Development, during which time he led the transaction to sell H.J. Heinz to an investment consortium consisting of 3G Capital and Berkshire Hathaway. Dave is a member of the Board of Directors for Essential Utilities, Inc., one of the largest publicly traded water, wastewater, and natural gas providers in the United States. He's a graduate of West Point and a bronze medal veteran of the U.S. Army. We are proud to count him among our Tepper School of Business alumni. He and his wife, Trish, have 6 children and reside in Columbus, Ohio. Dave, it is an honor for us to host you at your alma mater today.
Thank you, Dean Bajou. Thank you.
Leading us through what I'm sure will be a thought-provoking conversation is today's moderator, Blake Rodenberger. Blake is a second-year MBA student and president of one of today's co-sponsoring clubs, the Tepper Veterans Association. Like Dave, Blake is a graduate of West Point, an Army veteran. Thank you both of you for your military service. We're looking forward to a vibrant discussion. Blake, take it away.
Thank you, Dee. And obviously, thank you, Dave, for joining us this morning. And thank you to everyone in attendance. I've been able to speak to Dave a couple times leading up to this event. He's an amazing person and has given me amazing perspective that I'm excited to help share with you today.
Thank
Dave,
you.
Do you have anything to
No,
say?
just pleasure to be here with you, Blake.
Awesome.
So,
We'll get
Dean,
started then.
Thank you again.
We'll get started then. So Dave, you've obviously Dean Bejo, read your resume. You've had a very interesting and impressive career, and obviously that has led to you being in the C-suite now. But to start, can you take us back on your professional journey, back to the beginning here at Tepper, if you'd like to go back that far, and discuss kind of your journey through business and maybe some inflection points throughout your career?
No, I'd be happy to. So I actually started as a part-time student here, and I was working at Scott Paper Company. Scott Paper Company was in the process of getting acquired by Kimberly-Clark, so I looked at actually switching from part-time to full-time. So I went for a year part-time, acquisition was in flight, switched to full-time, and then I had a chance to work with my classmate out there, David, graduated in '96 with me. But upon graduating, I had a chance to join Ernst & Young, where I spent a number of years in consulting. Went to a smaller startup consultancy, and then I had a chance to go to H.J. Heinz. And I started out in strategy and planning, and as it often happens in the real world, the job that you get isn't necessarily the job that was advertised. And I found this job that sounded so intriguing in strategy ended up being a job where I reviewed capital appropriation requests, but not big fancy investments, but wastewater treatment plants, breeder sheds for a chicken business, smoke houses for a chicken business, things that weren't necessarily sexy. But I would tell you that I learned an enormous amount in that job, and I had a couple of occasions that gave me exposure to the CEO. Fast forward, I had a chance to work directly for the CEO as the director of strategy support, where I shadowed him, analyzed situations for him. Had a chance when we were thinking about some big divestitures to fly to New York regularly and work with our bankers and lawyers. And that started to open up a whole world to me that then turned into an assignment as the VP of strategy for the company. Did that for a while, I expanded that role once again. And then I made a lateral move into marketing, where I led the U.S. ketchup business for Heinz. And truth be told, you could take what I knew about marketing at that point in time and put it in the cap here and still have extra room. And I was forthright with the people on my team that I was working with. But it was a great opportunity to learn about an altogether different part of the business. What I had been working on was Wall Street. It was all about growth rates and margins and EPS and multiples. And what I had a chance to learn about was, who are your consumers? How big is an addressable opportunity? How are you going to make it? Can you make margins making it? Who are your competitors? So it's a Main Street view of the world. And that then gave me a chance to tie it all together as a general manager at Kraft, and then subsequently a CEO, where you end up working kind of that intersection of Wall Street, Main Street, Wall Street, Main Street, right? Yeah. So no, it's been a lot of fun.
That's great. That's great. You mentioned during your response your lateral move,
Yes.
a key lateral move. And I know we've talked about it. You've mentioned it as we've spoken about the value of doing so. And right, there's trade-offs. It can be difficult, especially for a young professional, to make a lateral move in their career. Wondering if you could share some advice or perspective for especially the young professionals in the room about those lateral moves and what you think that did for your career.
Well, the CFO at Heinz had a saying that if you want to build a building, you need a tall building needs a big, wide, strong foundation. And part of what those lateral moves afford you is the ability to build a foundation that's a little broader and a little bit deeper. And I think there's two sides of it. One, you want to be thoughtful because you don't want to be too broad, right? But at the same time, they really afford you to get a more complete view of the business. And I think as you guys think about your career moves, and if you aspire to be a general manager, you got kind of a choice. You can come up through one vertical and be a real specialist, or if presented with the opportunity to see other sides of the business. And those other sides of the business, I think, help you understand more completely the way the business works. Not that you become an expert in all of them for sure, but at least helps you understand how the business works more completely so you can hopefully make better decisions.
Next question that we have, is there a key leadership principle or two that you've carried through each stage of your career, or maybe how have those evolved over the course of your career?
Yeah, and I think you'll appreciate this one, Blake. I mean, maybe number one is we're in the people business. Mm-hmm. We just so happen to make food. So no matter what you do outside of school, and school really is a people business too, right? But it's by, with, for, and through people. So if you really want to accomplish anything great, you're going to need to really remember first and foremost, you're in the people business and it's about those relationships. So number one. Number two, I fundamentally believe that if you want to help a business grow, you have to figure out how you help the people in that business grow as well. If you really want to engage their hearts and their minds, you got to look beyond just them as a person and look at the relationship as a transaction, but go so far as to say, I know, Blake, that you're married and you guys have kids. I know you served at Fort Polk, and I know you have broader aspirations in your life. And what I find is, one, most productive, but also most rewarding at the end of the day is looking at that person and saying, how do I help them grow, not just as a professional and help us get this task done, whatever that is, but help you be a better father, help you be a better husband, help you be a better son to your kids, right? Or whatever your aspirations are in your life, but look at that person more completely. And when you engage people at that level and you do it authentically, it just unlocks magic. As I look back on truly the most rewarding moments in my career, aren't we hit a number? I watched a team accomplish something, and just looking at the looks on those people's faces when they accomplished something that they didn't think that they could do. They came and they shared the news, and you celebrate with them. The business is the beneficiary of that accomplishment, right? But the person is really the beneficiary because they've taken their ability to the next level, and now they can only do more stuff, right? So.
Yeah, that's great. And it reminds me this morning at our roundtable discussion with some students, you kind of described the concept of the big C versus the little c in terms of culture and how to lead through people. Would you mind sharing
I'll be happy
a little bit about that?
Yeah, the question for the benefit of the group was, navigating cultures and companies, and how do you think about culture as you move farther up in an organization? And every company has a unique culture. And I think it is true that as you move up, sometimes it's harder to break through with people authentically on a team and fundamentally build trust. But maybe starting with the following, that really culture begins with you. That's the little c culture. What kind of culture do you want to create for the people that work around you? So if you're leading a team or you're a member of a team, there's a simple adage: you can't control whether your boss is a jerk, but you can certainly control whether the people that work for you have a boss that's a jerk, right? And that's a choice. And you want to be very thoughtful. Don't let the fact that your boss might be a jerk be an excuse for you to be a jerk, right? But again, you go back to the same lessons then, engaging people authentically. And no matter whether you're working with a C-suite team or you're working with a team on a project on a brand, I think it starts with, it's a layered cake. The bottom layer is trust. How do you create an environment that has trust, where people are willing to be transparent? That next level is transparency and honesty. If you're not creating an environment where people trust one another, I don't think they're willing to be necessarily transparent. They may not lie to you, right? But they may hold back. They may say, Blake, I see this doesn't look good, it's not gonna work out, but I just don't feel comfortable saying it. You create an environment that has trust, they're gonna say, Blake, this is a bad dream. This is not gonna work out, right? But if you have trust and you have honesty, then I think you can create collaboration. Right? If you create an environment where you can have really good collaboration, you're drawing everybody's gifts into that exercise, you can achieve performance, and the performance will drive results, right? Yeah, but I think it's very much taken a very deliberate view of just not the business and the price points and things like that, but looking at the team. The goal is to just not do it once, but to do it over and over and over and over and over and over, and faster and better and faster and better and bigger, right? But that begins then with working with one team, multiple teams, but it's all fundamentally trust, transparency and honesty, collaboration, performance, and then results.
That's great. That's great perspective. Sticking on the theme of teams, as a senior executive now, how do you approach team building? Are there certain values or characteristics that you look for in a team, or conversely, maybe worth sharing for the group? How do you view the core functions of a team, and how do those fit together?
Yeah. So we literally invest time. In the course of a year, this past year, we probably had 4 or 5 offsites, which were principally geared towards improving our performance of a team. The thing is, every time you bring a new person in a team, the dynamics of the team change a little bit. Somebody leaves from a team, they change a little bit. And it's sort of like in a family having kids. You set sort of values and expectations of what's the normative behavior that's acceptable, beginning with how do you treat one another. And that I would say of our 4 values in our company, number 1 is this idea of respect. We fundamentally respect the dignity of every single person that is here, right? And we meet the person at that level. You are a person and we respect their dignity, right? And then we have others. Another important one is courage, right? Not like run into the burning building courage, but the courage to speak your mind. If you have an idea, I want you to feel the courage to speak your mind. Another important one is humility, right? And what do we mean by that? That there's a propensity for the farther people get along in their career, the more they feel like they understand that they have all the answers. But the problem is, the more you sort of imbue that mindset, the more you shut yourself off from the organization. Because if you don't have humility, I'm not sure you can be open-minded, truly open-minded. No, I want to hear what you have to say. And if you're not open-minded, I'm not certain that you can learn. And if you're not learning, I'm not sure you can grow. You're going to be stuck, right? So that would be another one of those critical values that we would look for on our team that we talk about openly, right? And the last would be hungry. Not like hungry wins lunch, but hungry and that you're driven, right? Not running over people driven, but just have an inner desire inside of yourself to be better, right?
Absolutely.
And best is an abstract, good is an abstract, but better is measurable every single day. Where did you start? What did you do? And are you better?
And this morning you also mentioned some key components as you were explaining to us kind of the cake, the layers of that cake there. One of them was predictability. Another was
competence.
Capability, I'm wondering if, I think from your perspective, as a senior executive, that's a very important way to view teammates, but it also may be a value to the folks in here to kind of learn, in your eyes, what a model teammate looks like. Would you mind expanding on those?
I think it's those 4 values that I've described. There's a book by, I think, Pat Lencioni. It's called The Perfect Teammate or something like that. But basically what we're looking for would be hungry, so somebody that's driven to perform, right? But also somebody fundamentally that respects the dignity of every single person. And I think really that one has just continued to move to the fore, right? Obviously respecting people's, whether you're a white person or person of color, or you're gay or straight or cis or trans. But I think it's looking beyond that which is on the surface and understand that every person has a soul, and how do you meet them there, and understanding that we all have this aspiration at some level to grow, right? And if you're really committed to helping somebody grow, it may mean, hey, I want to help you grow here, but it could be that you have talents and gifts that just aren't a good fit here at some point, right? And being willing to have that conversation with them courageously, that your gifts, and they are manifest, just aren't a perfect fit for what we're doing here. So, I mean, we talk about those really openly.
It's a really good perspective. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Shift the focus a little bit to innovation. I was really amazed this morning when you spoke a little bit on how innovation works at your company. And I guess for a little context, so the Lancaster Colony, Team Marzetti, partner with brand names and sell those products off the shelf. Not to speak for your company, but there's a lot of power in those brand names. But your company, I think, still does a very good job of leading innovation and doing so in a way that's not only beneficial for you, but your partners as well. So I'm wondering if you could talk about how innovation works.
Sure. So obviously we're in the food space, so it's all about flavor. And our particular corner of the food space is sauces and dressings, dips and things like that. And something has sort of taken place over the last 10 years that sort of moved the world a little bit in our direction. From a protein perspective, beef has sort of been flat to declining. And chicken as a protein, because of its nutrition and cost and environmental impact, has been growing. We all know chicken tastes like chicken. It's very bland, and it just begs for sauces. And that's where we come into the restaurant space. And what we do is we have a team of chefs and product developers, and we sit with, on a regular basis, some of the biggest restaurants in the country. They come to Columbus, where we have a big innovation center with kitchens and bench tops. And we look at their calendar from 6 months to 24 to 30 months out. And we go season by season, and we talk about what are the trends It might be sweet and spicy, it might be hot. What type of hot? Is it an Asian hot versus a Mexican hot? And they'll talk about what they want to plan for their menu, whether it's salads or protein, sometimes it's beverages. And we'll come up with, let's say, 50 ideas. And then we can rapidly prototype those, and we'll taste them. We can cook up their food. If they use peanut oil, we'll cook in peanut oil. If they grill, we will grill. But we replicate their kitchen at our facility, and we literally try the food. And they'll say, hey, of these 50, we love these 15 not so much. These, let's put on the shelf for a while. They're not ready for prime time. But let's iterate again on these 15. And we'll do it again, sometimes in the same day. And then they'll say, let's put it in front of consumers. And we have a place where we can do consumer testing right there to get feedback. And then they'll say, we love these 3. We want to put them into restaurants for a test. And so we'll make up smaller batches we can send to their restaurants, and they'll test and get feedback. Consumer reaction, but also how hard is this item to work with in a restaurant? And if they like them, then they'll say, hey, we're going to take these 5, let's say, and by season, they'll tell us when they want those items to be out, and we'll help scale them to 3,000 restaurants or whatever their business holds. So it's this kind of cool space where we work with them on flavor development and sauces, but we can also then scale. And if it does something really unique and takes off, like Nashville Hot, if you remember that from KFC, was an item that we developed for them, and it was a world beater. So obviously, the forecast started at X, it ended up being 3X, so we needed to figure out how we could scale it and keep up with the demand.
That's great. It's really interesting to me, especially because I think deliberately your company decides to kind of play in the background and let those brands really shine and support them. But that support goes much farther, obviously, than the production process.
Sure.
In the way that you can help them innovate and really incorporate new strategies into their portfolios. That's great. You talked a little bit about not only the innovation, but your ability to scale for those partner companies. Could you talk to us a little bit about how the way that your company uses digital tools, production processes, technologies to improve those operations, and especially in partnership with your companies?
Yeah, probably 2 sides. I would tell you, in the course of the last few years, we've been through a big transformation technically. We had a very old ERP system installed in 1996. 97. It was COBOL-based. We've replaced that. It's hard to find COBOL programmers, believe it or not. But we put in SAP end-to-end. And then putting in SAP as one common in the cloud platform has allowed us to use sort of the front-end planning systems that we would use for forecasting and production scheduling. And downstream, it's allowed us to put in place automation as well. Things that might control how you fill, your fill rate, that automatically go back to the filler head to make sure that your weight control is really tight. So for us, it's probably less at this point in time about AI and more about just improving our manufacturing systems to make sure that we're operating as cost effectively as possible. But I think with the right platform in place, now we can begin to think about much more advanced tools.
That's very cool. And I think that is a very good segue into what might be my favorite question of the day, is your experience in leading through adversity, with COVID not counting. Right?
Yeah.
We're not talking about COVID, but when we spoke the other day, you had a really interesting story about I won't spoil it for everyone, but a controversy that you worked your way through that really affected your digital systems at the company. I'm wondering if you could tell us about that.
Sure, no, I'd be happy to. So on July 20th of 2019, it was a Saturday, I think it was a Saturday, 19th or 20th, I was out on a bike ride with a bunch of our teammates. We have a team that rides for a big cancer fundraiser in Columbus called Pelotonia. So 6:30 in the morning, we're out on the ride, and I came back after the ride was over, and a CIO of the company, who's a very close personal friend also, he was a CIO of Heinz North America when we worked together here, texted me and said, hey, we're having a network issue. I'm like, wonder what a network issue is. I wonder what the issue is. So, packed up my bike, and he said, we expect to be back. We think it's, Verizon. And by the time I got home, he said, it's not Verizon. It's our issue. I'm like, oh, this doesn't sound good. And he said, production is impacted. Now it's Saturday, and most Saturdays and Sundays we don't run as hard as we do during the week, particularly in that season. And I said, this isn't sounding good. So I took a shower and I told my wife, I'm going to need to go into work, see what's going on. And by the time I got there, he said, everything is shut down. We have black screens of death. And it was about 2 hours after that that we saw identifiers on a couple of those screens that it was a ransomware malware that had locked us up completely. So fortunately, I described those really old Cobalt systems. They were able to keep running. They were air-gapped, and nothing would stop those. So the plants that were running at that point in time could run. But everything else was shut down. All of the email was shut down. Our ability to print bills of lading for trucks, everything shut down. Our ability to communicate with our teammates completely shut down. And if you want me, I'll go on and explain the story.
Absolutely.
I mean, this was sort of a first order crisis. A business is like an organism, right? It has a pumping heart, it needs to run, right? It generates cash, it consumes cash, employees, everything, right? All of a sudden, this thing is in distress. And so, Liam, we're talking, how big is this? What's it impacting? Who's impacting? Who's not? And, you know, you have the fog of war. It's kind of hard to piece together everything. Because remember, communication was shut down. We're on cell phones now. And he said, well, we have backups on everything offsite. We're going to put in the backup and reboot. So that was the plan as of Saturday night. Went home. The plan was to be booting, to try to get these tapes reinstalled. And I explained to Blake, I came out of Mass that next morning where I went with my wife and kids and prayed extra hard. And he said, reboot didn't work. We're still down. On to the next plan. Now it's Sunday, and things are really going to start spinning up the next day. So we called the whole leadership team together and got their head around what was happening. And then we actually called the extended leadership team together. So it would have been not just the direct reports, but their direct reports. And we shared with them at that point in time what we know. It was a ransomware malware. It had locked up our systems. We were going to really struggle to be able to operate. We couldn't print. We had all of our employees who were going to be coming to our facilities at that point in time. So we went to Office Max and bought a printer so we could hook a computer into it to print flyers that said company meeting in the northwest corner because we couldn't get a building fast enough. And I stood up on a table and explained to the organization what was going on and said, you know, unfortunately, we have been hit by a ransomware malware. It's locked up the company. We're in the throes of putting together a plan. We will get through this, but here's where we are. In the meantime, just hang in there, do what you can do, and more information will be forthcoming. So talk about the need for humility, right? You got what you got. And so anyway, from there, though, we quickly assembled in a room, and we put issues on one side that were going to incapacitate us and could kill us within, you know, days and weeks if we didn't get them right. And then we had a long list of issues that were inconveniences. So what were the sorts of things that could incapacitate you? We couldn't get access to our cash. So we have zero debt. We had cash on the balance sheet, but it was Sunday, now Monday. We needed to make payroll for our union plants on Thursday, and they want checks. We couldn't get to the cash. Now that is a big issue, right? And there were other issues that were in the incapacitation area. For example, the ability to present bills of lading to get them onto pallets and trucks so we could get shipments out the door. And then a long list of inconvenience like, Blake, you can't get to your email right now, right? So anyway, we went through a really deliberate process then of incapacitation, inconvenience, and then we brought the board along in this process along the way. You know, talked to the board on Saturday, talked to the board on Sunday, and unfortunately this thing just got bigger and messier as we went. And then we set about putting together a plan to recover. What we found is we could use some workarounds to be able to print labels, to get our label printers to work. We had workarounds to get the bills of lading. Our bank, Huntington, one of our banks, we have an assortment of banks we work with, came to us, and they helped us through getting access to our cash. They brought a computer and said, out of a box, you're going to use this computer to make sure it wasn't on our network so we could get access. So anyway, we went through this, but it took to get fully recovered about 6 months. But along the way, we discovered that it wasn't kids in somebody's basement. It was a Russian crime entity, we thought, somewhere. We had to figure out, okay, they wanted a ransom. Are we going to pay it or are we going to not? We had the debate of whether we paid or not. It was a modest amount at that point in time. It was about $350. Our insurance deductible was about $250,000. So $350,000, $250,000. Again, I'm being quite forthcoming with you as you're working our way through this. We were on the path to starting to recover, but there were two things that were tied up, the domains control servers that really sort of affect traffic in a network, many of you understand better than I do, that were locked up, and they were going to take time to rebuild. So we figured, why don't we as a belt and suspenders pay the ransom to see if we can get these things back online? But before you pay a ransom, if you're not careful, there are a number of laws against that. If the counterparty on the other side is tied to the Iranians or the South Koreans or some of these other governments, it's felony. So you're working with lawyers all of a sudden to make sure that that if you are going to pay, you're going to pay to a Bitcoin purse that's legal to pay to. We had to figure out how to get Bitcoin, right? So a massive, steep learning curve, yeah. Right? All of this is negotiated on the Tor web, if you're familiar with the Tor web, the dark web. I again, talk about, you think you learn a lot in school. Well, this was a very steep course in crises. When we didn't want to click on that banner on the screen, so we had a consulting firm that was assigned to us by our cyber insurance company that did this stuff. It takes you to a landing page, and it's literally like, imagine that you want to configure a car, and you're looking at a Ford, and somebody says, can I help you? Well, you click on this, it goes to the bad guy landing page on the Tor web, and the bad guy starts to interact with our people on the other side. And they start to talk about what they want, and you need to go through a process. Are they really the bad guy? Do they have the key to decrypt that malware, right? And literally, you take a part of the infected code, you put it in there, and then they decrypt that for you to show you that they have the key. So, I mean, there was this whole elaborate process that you work through to get this done. But I think probably one of the more complicated crises that I've worked through in my career, yes, certainly would have been that one. But I will share, it's, so we had this polluted production environment. We created an altogether new production environment that was clean, and we sanitized everybody and everything that came out of that. So it ended up being over 1,000 computers were scrapped, and everybody's computers were reset. But what that affected, in essence, we took on-prem email, we went to Office 365. We had a lot of people that we didn't have time to train, so we said, find a millennial, they'll teach you, right? We were just that transparent with people, like, sorry, here's what we got. Find somebody that knows how to use it, you'll get it. You know, just so it was, we made the best of it, right? And so anyway, I would say if that was July, by August, we're running normally. By November, we're back in the new environment. And it's all cloud-based now. Now, the silver lining there that I could have never imagined was in February, COVID came along. Now we had transitioned everything from on-site to single instance in the cloud that had the ability of our IT team to control everything remotely. We had everything in place except for Microsoft Teams. And we literally hit the button, bing, deployed Teams, and said, find a millennial, figure out how to use it. I guess you can't say that anymore. Maybe Gen Z, right? Find somebody. Just find somebody that knows what they're doing. But anyway, we deployed it. And I think that exercise actually, first of all, brought us together really, really closely as a team. But it also helped us, by way of Providence, prepare for COVID, where we had to work in a much more distributed fashion. So
I appreciate you sharing that story. That was I learned so much just Friday when you were able to share that with me.
I hope you never run into one, but if you do, call me.
Yeah, absolutely. Do we have time for another question or transition to Q&A? Okay. So at this time, Dave, we'll open it up to the crowd for any questions from the audience. We've got a microphone that will be coming around if you just raise your hand.
Hello, my name is Christian Reichert. I'm a
Hi,
first year
Christian.
here at Tepper MBA. So my question really is aimed at succession and having a plan towards continuing leadership once you leave a place or leave a position.
Yeah.
So how do you really go about not only identifying what the future leaders are and developing them, but finding that special successor that's going to be coming in after you and hopefully improving upon your work?
Yeah. Well, it's a good thing we got the easy question first. It's a super important question, Christian, because at several levels. There's my level, but what I would tell you, a big part of any job, if you're leading any team, but the team I lead today is looking at my direct reports and then their direct reports and constantly looking at the capacity and capabilities that you have. I think what's natural is you go into a role and you're always going to ask yourself, what sort of machine capacity do we have? Can we keep up with demand, right? And you're always looking at that chart, right? What's our demand look like? What's the supply capacity look like? Blah, blah, blah. But I would submit that it's equally, if not more important, that you got to also look within your team and constantly ask yourself, do we have the right capacity and capability to meet the evolving needs of the business? So I spend an enormous amount of time on that exercise, not only just looking at my direct reports, but with them looking at their direct reports. And in the last 8 years, we've gone from $1 billion in sales to $2 billion in sales. And what needs to be true today is different than what we did before. The skills we need are different. And as we think about growing to, 3 and beyond, what we need in the business sometimes is the same, but oftentimes we need a different set of skills. So it's very much challenging yourself to look ahead and say, what sort of skills do you need, right? That's one side. But the other is, I think, the technical dimensions of the organization may change, but I think you want to be honest with yourself at the same time that you want to watch your culture, right? So as you're thinking about bringing people in, you want to ask not only do they have the right attributes and capabilities, but do they have the right fit with our culture, right? Our values. How do they feel about things like respect? How do they feel about things like courage? But you end up spending a lot of time on that. Now, for a CEO succession, I've watched a couple, and maybe I'll just share with you maybe how I'm approaching it. So I've been in the seat now about 8.5 years. And it's, I think the average is probably more like 4. So I've outlasted most. But as you think about it, I'm very much focused on where the business is likely to get over the next handful of years. And we're domestic today. Will we be international in the future? Today we play in dressings and sauces, and to a lesser degree in specialty bakery. Is it conceivable that we'll need to add another leg to the stool, right? So it's asking questions like that, regular conversations with our board of directors at a couple levels. One is my own timing and being transparent with the board about how, and I don't want to necessarily share that with you, but what I would tell you is I'm very transparent with them because I feel like it's an obligation that I have as a fiduciary to be transparent and make sure that I'm allowing for a very orderly transition. And the measure of that should be, does that company continue to perform, right? But it's laying out my timeline and having an open conversation with the board about where we think the company is going, the sort of skills that we think the company is going to need, and making sure that we have people that are in those seats that would, with the right coaching, have the chance to grow. And hopefully we can challenge them and they can grow. And then when that timing makes sense, I move on and that person moves into the seat. And what I've said with my board is, I don't want to stay until I have to be pushed out, right? And you find the right person and the timing's right. If that means that I need to step back a little bit early, I'm probably okay with that, right? But if the person isn't growing quite as fast or something goes sideways that's unanticipated and I need to stay a little longer, that's okay too. But it's more of a window than it is a particular point in time. But that too becomes really, really important, right? And I think humility is also, I talked about that as an important value. I mean, it's being able to look at yourself and say, you can't do it forever, right? It requires a certain level of energy, and nobody has that level of energy forever. And the needs of the business evolve, right? And when that time comes, you got to be willing to kind of hand the baseball back to the coach and let the coach go to the bullpen, bring somebody else in to finish off the game for a win. But it's a great question. Thank you.
Any other questions
Please.
from the crowd?
Hi, Dave. George Keenan, second
Hi,
year
George.
VP of the Vets Association with Blake. Thanks for being here. Really
Pleasure.
appreciate it. Looking back on the ransomware event or COVID, or if there's anything else you can think of, how did those affect or push maybe organizational or procedural changes to help with resiliency or agility when you're facing those kinds of issues?
Oh, it's a massive consideration. So I would tell you, just as any company, period, private or public, but as a public company, you're obligated to do it, needs to be thinking about enterprise risk. And you got to be thinking about redundancy. It's your systems redundancies, right? And are you making yourself a hard target for future cyber attacks? But it's also looking at your manufacturing redundancy, your supply redundancy. We live in a complicated world, right? I don't have to tell you guys that, but even as a domestic company, I mean, we spend a lot of time looking at where we're sourcing ingredients from. And if there was an issue that came up in the Taiwan Strait, how could that impact our supply chain? So some of them are hopefully farther out. Some of them are closer in. If there's a bird flu, what's that going to do to the price of eggs? And what's that going to do to the price of our sauces? So we have a process where we meet every other month, the CFO, the CEO, the head of supply chain, our general counsel. And we look at end-to-end enterprise risk. We'll do a deep dive on employee safety. We'll do a deep dive on food safety. We'll do a deep dive on production resiliency. We'll do one on cyber. And then we've started to add another segment that we're looking at, which is focused on our suppliers. What we're seeing more and more is you're only as strong as your supplier. So if we're single source for key ingredients, how do we make sure that we have contingency plans in place? But that is, it really is, it's a vital part of what you need to do running a business.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
I think we have time for one more question from the crowd.
Christian.
I'll just talk, right?
Yeah.
So just to follow up that hard question.
Yeah, bring another one.
Has there been like a sauce or a flavor that you really wanted to come out to market and just didn't work out for one reason or another?
Well, if the place relied on me for the great ideas, we'd be in deep trouble. So I still have a pet idea. There's a place in Washington, D.C. called Crisp and Juicy. Have you ever been through there? Are you familiar with it? Northern Virginia? It's a Peruvian chicken place that has this amazing, amazing sauce. But it's a hard-to-source pepper. And we've sort of taken this sauce and we've taken it apart. We've tried to figure out how to make it at a reasonable cost. I'd love to figure out how we get that thing to the marketplace, because it would be a world beater if we could. But I mean, honestly, most of the great ideas come from other people in the business, and I just cheer for them when they do. If I could just take a second, there's maybe one thing that I would share with you guys, just as leaders, that one of the lessons that I didn't bring up, but I think it's probably worth sharing. That is, you think about the people business, everything is by, with, for, and through people, right? When you think about leaders versus managers, one of the things that I've really come to appreciate is that if you're a leader, you work at the nexus of two really, really important things. One is you're asked to focus on accomplishing a mission, right? And that's easy. But the other is, I believe, and I think this distinguishes leaders from managers, is I think you also have a moral obligation to uphold the dignity of every single person that you work for. And the true leader is able to figure out, how do you help the business grow, all the while protecting and enhancing and helping that person grow, right? If you're all about the dignity, well, then you're probably not going to have a profitable business at some level. But if you're all about the mission, to the extent to the absence of the dignity of the people that you're working for, one, I don't think it's sustainable long term. I think you're going to struggle to find employees that want to work for you and customers that are going to want to buy from you. But as you think about how you graduate from here and you enter into the workforce and you're working, it's understanding very openly that if you're a very caring leader that engages with people authentically, Sometimes it works perfectly, right person in the right job, and they just go. But there are often times where you're faced with the hard circumstance where somebody's in the job and they're just not performing well. Then what? Well, you can coach, but they're still not performing well. Then what? I think it's those moments in time where you meet that person and you have the honest conversation possibly that, hey, look, you just may not have the right skills for this job. Doesn't mean that you don't have terrific capabilities that would be much better applied in a different sort of role or a different set of circumstances. But it's understanding as leaders, as you graduate, that not only are you aware of it, but you embrace it, right? Because I think if you do, one, you'll deliver better results, but I think you'll also feel better about what you're doing. And I think the business world today is hungering for more and more of that sort of behavior.
That's great. I appreciate that, Dave. And that, you know, the wisdom you shared there is, I think, a great endpoint for the conversation today. You know, it's the type of wisdom that only comes through, you know, such an impressive career that you've had. So I want to thank you again for joining us today and introduce Dean Bejo for closing remarks.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Blake, for being an amazing interviewer. I will remember that. I want to really thank Dave for spending his time here at the Tepper School. I learned a lot about leadership, authenticity. I always thought that this was a really important part of leadership. But it's great to hear it from you. I learned a lot about innovation. Learned a lot about crisis management, which was really, I should tell you, you're a great storyteller, and you probably know that. But this was really great to learn all of that. I have a secret wish, which is that you learned all of that here at Tepper, and you're just applying whatever you learn here in being a very successful business leader. So thank you so much for sharing all of that today with us. And I have a small token of appreciation for you.
It's beautiful. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, it's been a pleasure being with you guys. Thank you.